when I realized it's not about the software. It really isn't. As much as I'd love to be able to say System Hub is the only solution and everybody needs to have this, there are some challenges with every platform. There's pros and cons. If you don't have any system, get a folder, start to talk about that folder structure I've got. And then the real key is, when you think about this idea of being able to find it when you need it, part of that then becomes, if you've got a project management platform, if you're running projects through an Asana, a Teamwork PM, a Podio, a Monday, or something like that, when you start to think about assigning tasks out to team members, the point at which you assign the task, you want to have the link to that video or that training at that point. So you might say, all right, this task is getting assigned to Sally to issue out an invoice to the client. And in the description, there is a link to how to issue out that invoice in MYOB. And that way she gets assigned the task. But if she can't do it, it makes it so much easier to reassign it to someone else, because you've already got the how-to document or training right there. That's actually the real key.
Hello, video marketing professionals. Welcome to the podcast that takes the mystery out of producing videos. Today, our guest is David Jennings, founder of System Hub, a software company that makes standard operating procedures systems easy. David believes in building system-centered businesses so owners can step back and enjoy freedom for more important things. He detailed this in his book, Systemology, which gives you a step-by-step system that fixes owner-dependent businesses. In 2016, David successfully systematized himself out of his own business, and since then he has made it his mission to free all business owners worldwide from the daily operations of running their business. So by the end of this episode, I'm sure you're not only going to be able to have more time, increase productivity, but reduce errors and scale business. I'm your host, Chris Schwager, and let's check in with co-host Brendan Southwell. How are you, good man?
I am very excited. I've read David's book. I've been around systems for a long time. I think there's systems in pretty much everything we do, whether they're good or bad, they're there. So I'm keen to learn more.
We're the yin and yang. Brennan's the nerdy dude, the systems dude. I'm the flaring, flamboyant, creative dude, and the yin and yang, and that's how we've maintained our business relationship for the last 20 years. That's why I'm running the driver's seat up here. But Brendan, why don't you come on up and drive with me today, because I think you in the hot seat talking to Dave, I think would be really beneficial for you. So how do we do that virtually? I don't. All right, good. He's in.
Done.
He's in. He's up there in the driver's seat. So here's our conversation with David Jennings. David, thanks for coming on the show. What prompted you to create Systemology?
I saw this as like one of those big, poorly addressed problems when it comes to business owners. And I feel really passionate about business owners and the struggles they go through and the work that they put in. And I just feel compelled to set up this business and Systemology and solve this problem. It's a bit funny because all of my previous businesses, I just kind of fell into. I started doing some digital marketing. I was selling some stuff online. I even had a video business, which I'm sure we'll talk about. We had a rock and roll clothing music store, and all of these ones I just kind of fell into. But this has been the first business that I've really just thought, ooh, this is something that I want to work on and something that I'm really drawn to do.
How long have you been operating for?
At Systemology, we're coming up to about 5 years now. It's kind of, there's been a combination. We started off with the software, System Hub, and then really found that business owners needed more than just the software. It's really not the software that systemizes a business. It's a way of thinking, and that's what Systemology evolved into.
You were talking about your history with your dad being...
Yes.
Basically coaching you to get chores done. And I just thought that was so cool. I went home and told my wife, I was like, God, listen to this story. And that was kind of what spawned this idea about being quite process orientated. I mean, please elaborate for our listeners.
So my dad was a systems engineer, and he developed a thing called the sheet for my brother and I. I would have been 6 years old. My brother was 8 years old. And it was an elaborate 3-page document where we would earn points for different activities, things like cleaning our bedroom, looking after the bird, being good to our brother. And it's funny, I watched the sheet evolve over time. And when my brother and I would do things that my dad didn't like, it would end up finding its way into the sheet. Things like, if you knock into dad's speaker box, you will lose 300 points. And basically, he would tally up all of the points over the course of the week. On the final page, he had this little legend, and then he'd use that to calculate out how much pocket money we got. And he got really elaborate. He had rules like, if you get 3 weeks in a row over 350 points, you unlock this extra bonus. If you get 5 weeks, it's this bonus. And I played the game incredibly well. Dad said I bled him dry. He had to change the rules of the game with how much he was paying out. My brother, on the other hand, that's another story. He didn't like the sheet. He hated the sheet. I often say he didn't give a sheet about the sheet. He completely decided not to engage with the sheet. Whereas I loved it and embraced it. So it's kind of, that first introduction to this idea of some people systems people, some people aren't systems people.
Yes. I just love that so much. Brendan and I both started as singles in this working relationship and now have a combination of 5 kids collectively. So I think we can both appreciate that story, and I take those tips. In fact, I wanted to just go and start drafting it up, but I'm not the systems guy in the family. My wife's the systems person, so I might have to get her to listen to this and make sure that she implements something similar to our kids.
I love that. You touched on something that very common, I think a lot of videographers need to think about, is this idea of the yin and the yang. And you talked about your wife being the systems person, Brendan being the systems person, like in the different areas of your life, because a lot of videographers, they are these big picture, visionary, creative type people, and they might not see themselves as a systems person. And that's okay. You might not be a systems person. That doesn't mean you can't own a systems driven business. What you need to find is the yin to your yang. It's, the studio manager. It's the person who can cross the T's and dot the I's, because it's really important from a business perspective. And the business owner, they can appreciate it and value the systems and support it and make sure that they lead that example for the rest of the team. And then you have someone else that really helps to manage the team behind them. I think that's a missing piece for a lot of videographers.
Well, I think listening to you over the years, particularly with Den Lenny, I mean, if you are a video company listening to this, then please check out his show, which is the Business Video Accelerator. You'll love it. And he's got listeners all over the world. But, I think that constant reassurance that if I was ever going to pull out of this business and, not be on the tools all the time, that I needed to be able to get rid of those, chip off those micro tasks. And we've been successfully doing that for the last couple of years now. We've got 3 virtual assistants, and it's just been remarkable. Every inch of my day now is just like, do I need to do this? Can I Loom record the video and get rid of it? On Loom recording, you said something which was really interesting, and it probably got me more interested in just recording everything that I did, because I knew that there was an ability to get rid of it. But how important is that process, today's, I guess, landscape of getting things off your plate, to be able to quickly record rather than sitting down and kind of writing things out or feeling overwhelmed at having to kind of draft stuff up? How much easier or how much more important is it just to have a Loom recording video?
Yeah. A big part of this, for a lot of videographers who are perfectionists, they want to get things just right, and they think about how the system needs to be, and they might even have a picture in their head of what they think a good system is. Maybe think of McDonald's or Amazon or Google or Subway or something, like a franchise type business, and you think of these detailed processes, and then they think, oh, that's what I need in my business if I'm going to think about systems. And that sometimes is what gets people stuck. And if you get through the idea, especially as a videographer, and you just say, just use Loom and just consider almost like the first Loom that you do for a system or a process as take 1. Like it's the first version. That's the worst it's ever going to be. Just capture something, just capture it raw, just have all of the mistakes and everything. And that becomes your starting point because it's much easier to edit and pull out the key steps and rework it. And next time you do it, you reshoot it. And it's this constant, never-ending process of improvement and tightening things. And Loom makes it so easy. And it's infinitely easier, like you said, just to delete something. You can't go back and capture it. I've always been a huge fan of recording everything, whether I'm speaking at events, whether I'm speaking with clients, having client meetings, or having incoming calls or training staff. Like, we just record everything because I go, the cost to record it, like, I'm doing it anyway. That's half the work. It's not really, I can decide whether or not it's useful afterwards. Let's just record it.
Yes.
And that's a philosophy now that I've carried with me for all businesses.
Yeah. We had a scriptwriter just start with us in the last 2 months, and I recorded 20 videos in the first 2 weeks. And it would kind of be almost like, just before I start this task, can I record it? And just so that everybody is familiar with what Loom is, it's basically screen recording software that allows you to really quickly capture everything that's on the screen and your camera and your voice, and just have it goes up to the cloud and it's done, it's stored, and it's kind of, you can stow it away. And I'm sure your VA will dig it up at one point and transcode it and do wonderful things and turn it into a proper written process.
And the way to think about it, like for me, I kind of, as we were building our videography business, I started to think beyond me. Now, it was easy in one way. I can't actually operate a camera. I'm not a video editor. I know some of the super basics just by being in the space, but I really don't know how to do it. And it meant from day one, I had to build it with this idea of a systems business that has been delivered by someone else who's actually in there operationally doing all of the work. And that was really beneficial to me. And it ends up being one of the challenges for a lot of videographers is they might work with someone, they know how to do it, and they think, oh, why don't I go out on my own and do my own thing? They already know how to do it all, and they end up becoming that center cog. And it's really hard to let go because they've won the clients, they've overseen the shoot, they're doing the editing, and then it's very hard for them to get the space. But if you start to think about the business beyond you, and you think about your business in terms of maybe some of the different departments. You've got sales, you've got marketing, maybe you've got the operations and the finance and a couple of these different departments. And when you do your Loom recording videos, just start to filter them into those folders. So, I'm making a proposal for a client for one of the videos. Well, that goes into sales underneath the proposal folder. And you just start to catalog this stuff over time. And if it's just you to start with, then maybe one of the first steps, and you talked about actually off air just before we started, is I think actually maybe it was on air, about your virtual assistants. Then one of the first hires you've got after you've recorded a base set of these videos is to get the virtual assistant in to watch those videos, pull out some of the key steps and create some of the documentation, and potentially start chiseling away and taking some of those tasks off your plate. So that's like a very clear roadmap for someone, like 1, 2, 3. Step number 1, record everything in Loom and organize it into place. Step number 2, get a virtual assistant. Step number 3, have that virtual assistant start to document. And step number 4, then let them to start taking some of those tasks over.
I don't want Brennan to be a stranger because I do steamroll virtually every meeting that we have, and we have daily whips with our team, and Brennan's like, why don't you let one of the others talk today, and we'll do a round robin. So Brennan, please jump in. Don't feel like you're going to be cutting anyone off.
Sure, no worries, I'll do that. That's pretty much the only way I can get a word in, isn't it?
Shut up, Brendan. You're talking too much, mate. So when recording those looms, I'm very particular about the title that I generate. That's the only thing I really care about, is making sure that the title that I compose is clear and on point, and has that controlling idea built into it, so that when we do go back, and it could be, who knows, could be years, when we do go back and dig that up, that we're at least able to find and understand roughly what the video would be about. And it could be anything from a 3-minute recording to a 30-minute recording, depending on the process.
And there's a few like little naming conventions that we've kind of come up with, those sorts of things. Like a couple of general rules are things like if you can say the same thing in less words and it retain the same meaning, do it. And you also want to think in terms of, that's why that folder structure is important as well, because then it starts to give you indications on what this video is about. Because the aim of the game with these videos is to go, if someone wanted to find this and they sort of knew we had it, would they have a shot at finding it on their own? And that's where, it's a marketing function. That's got to do with social media. It's in that directory. Like it's that, you want that feeling of someone being able to find it. And I think, naming convention is really, really important. And that's why you need someone like a Brendan. So I am curious, Brendan, how and where are you storing this info? Like, what tools are you using?
He's flipping it. He's flipping it.
I thought I'd bring you up to the driver's seat. I thought I'd give it a crack.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Thank you for that little segue. That was perfect. So we do our systems. Firstly, we've got a flow chart. So we've got the overall flow of what are the major steps. And then from that, all these other documentations, templates, scripts, videos, all these different content pieces are then stored in, at the moment, they're stored in Google Drive and linked. So it's, I know there's System Hub, and we're currently looking at System Hub, and I'd love for you to chat about that as well.
It doesn't really matter. And that was the big insight I had when I started System Hub. When I realized it's not about the software. It really isn't. As much as I'd love to be able to say System Hub is the only solution and everybody needs to have this, you can make, there are some challenges with every platform, and there's pros and cons, but Google Drive, just starting there. If you don't have any system, get a folder, start to talk about that folder structure I've got. And then the real key is when you think about, and this comes back to something that Chris was talking about, this idea of being able to find it when you need it. And part of that then becomes, if you've got a project management platform, if you're running projects through an Asana, a Teamwork PM, a Podio, a Monday, or something like that, when you start to think about assigning tasks out to team members, the point at which you assign the task, you want to have the link to that video or that training at that point. So you might say, all right, this task is getting assigned to Sally to issue out an invoice to the client. And in the description, there is a link to how to issue out that invoice in MYOB. And that way she gets assigned the task. But if she can't do it, it makes it so much easier to reassign it to someone else, because you've already got the how-to document or training right there. That's actually the real key. Is if you get that right, you can really be saving them anywhere.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And what about marketing managers? A lot of our listener base and clients are marketing managers, and I suppose they may or may not be controlled by the business owner. Can they initiate, writing systems and start to make their roles easier?
I definitely think so. I had this discussion, and I don't know if your audience will be familiar with this gentleman, Michael Gerber. He wrote the book called The E-Myth, which is kind of like the Bible when it comes to the systems world for small business. And we had this discussion with him, and he said, because initially when I started working on Systemology, I kept on thinking, how do I take the business owner out of this equation? How do I just completely remove them and let the team go do all the systemizing? And then he said, that's okay, but don't let the business owner off the hook, because the business owner needs to be the one that starts this. They are the leader. They need to lead from example. They need to show the team that they're not above the law. And I'm not talking about that the business owner needs to be writing out the systems and the processes, because they're usually the worst people to do it. But what I'm talking about is saying to the team, this is important. This is how we do things here. Even when I go out on shoots, I follow the checklist, to make sure I've packed all the equipment that I need for the shoot, so that the leader starts with that first. Once that happens, then depending on the size of your team, you need to start to get buy-in from other team members. But look, if you're a marketing manager or, someone on the team and you hear this and you go, oh, our business owner needs this, you get Systemology, the book, from Amazon, you put it under the nose of the business owner, or if they're an audio person, you get them the Audible, because I am a visionary creative. And I got bitten by this idea of systems. I don't like writing systems and processes. I don't like documentation. Like, that's not my thing. But I've fallen in love with the result. And the book is written for the visionary creative to go, I get it. I know why this is important. Even though I didn't think I was a systems person, I can see how this is going to work for us. And it helps to get their buy-in. So it starts with the leader and then kind of filters down. But if you're, like I said, a marketing manager, first step, you've got to get that business owner's buy-in. It's hard for you to go off and do this siloed off to the side, because ultimately there's a good chance they'll undermine what it is that you're doing at some point. So getting their buy-in's key.
Yes. Yeah. And I imagine some of the objections from a business owner would be, I started this business so I could do what I'm passionate about and I love it. Why would I want to give it to someone else? What's your response to that?
So many different sort of objections and things that bubble up for business owners and even team members that have been stuck in their ways for a long way. Like, if you've been working in a video business for the last 5 years and you've always done things a certain way, someone comes around to you and says, oh, we're going to capture your best practice. We're going to bring everybody up to that standard. Or, hey, we're going to change the way that we're doing things. It's like, why do I need to change? The business has been working fine up until now. And what's the need for change? Fortunately, right now, there's never been an easier time to systemize, because you just blame COVID and you say, hey, because of COVID, we're working from home, things have changed, you might get sick, family member might get sick, you'll need time off. We just have to get a way of doing things so everybody can work virtually. We know how things operate. So that's one of the ways that you introduce it. As far as like for the business owner, and it's the same with every team member, you have to get down to, what does the team member actually want and what's important to them? Like, for the business owner, it might be different. They might want to reduce stress or create time or make the business more profitable, or who knows, maybe at some point they might want to sell it, or maybe they want to scale it. You have to find what's important to them. And then similarly for team members, you don't say, hey, we're systemizing because, Chris and Brendan want to go lie on a beach and have large amounts of money deposited into their bank account with very little work. Like, that's not going to get your team excited.
What's wrong with that?
So you have to think about it in terms of the team members' benefit. And what is it that they want? They want to know that, if I take a week off, Chris isn't going to be calling me up while I'm on vacation going, oh, did you follow up this client? Because they're wanting to know where this project is at. And then they come back from their holiday and then they spend the next 4 weeks catching up for the 1 week that they had off. That might appeal to someone by saying, well, by systemizing, we can get other people to step in. So when you have time off, you can have time off and you come back and you hit the ground running. For other people, it might be, you want to work up in the organization. We want to grow Ridge Films. We want to see it at that next level. So if you come in and you start systemizing and delegating to lower cost team members, that actually makes you more valuable, because now as a videographer, we can get an assistant who comes along and does all of the packing and the preparing and the ingesting of the footage and getting the projects ready. So you only do your magic, the shoot and the editing process. So you have to find where someone's at and help them to see how systems are going to improve their position. So long answer, short questions.
It always comes back to the why. Why are you doing it? Why is it important? Why should people care?
Some people, they just want a small videography business where they have 1 or 2 clients that they work on and it's feast or famine, and they just do it because it's a creative passion and that's part of the life that they're leading. It's a different path to be a business owner of a video business than a solo freelance videographer. Like a business, there are different things that you're going to have to work on as a business owner if you really want it to get to the point where it works without you.
Yes, yeah. And so back to team members, if they are working the process and find a better way, are they, what gives them authority or, the power, I suppose, to want to change that system? And what typically do they do to go about doing that without offending the business owner?
I feel like we're giving you advice on how to approach Chris.
Don't offend
way
Chris.
to do it. Firstly, a lot of it has to do with the culture that you build in the company. The real key here is we want to get to the point where team members go, this is how we do things here. And it's not this is how we do things here and we're rigid and we're structured and we follow this process and we don't think and we remove creativity. Instead, it's we hire really smart, creative people and we use systems as a way to take all of the admin component out of their day and make the things happen that need to happen. Prepping a client for a shoot, issuing out an invoice, setting up the project and saving the folder structure in Google Drive. There's a bunch of things that just have to happen, and we want to try and have that happen in a consistent manner. We make that happen with systems, and then that creates the space for the creativity. And we want to encourage constant and never-ending improvement. If there are better ways to do things, I mean, you can find your process and your way. I think initially, though, I say to most businesses, especially video businesses, you will get tremendous wins by just capturing your current best practice. You don't even need to invent anything new or optimize. Like if you just captured what was in Chris's head with all of the experience he's had doing the video stuff, and then develop the processes from there and get everybody up to that standard, you'll get huge wins just from that, even before we start sort of changing and optimizing beyond that. But it kind of also depends where you're at and how long you've been doing it. You guys have been doing it for a little while. And really, Chris, as a business owner, he probably just he'd love the idea of this working without him. And the idea that team members can see him. And then he can work on the projects that most interest him and the things that really grab him. And you find the more you do this, like I think about our video business, we first started off with Melbourne Video, and I started off with a fixed price video, and we created a real set package to tell like a your story type video. And we had a set price, and it was very systemized. That was the off the shelf thing, right? Initially, my main videographer was overseeing that, but he wanted that more creative part. So that just became like a cash flow engine in the business where we put our new recruits and our new videographers through to learn the ropes and get the skills and wax on, wax off. And then the higher end projects, we would leave that to Adrian. And they were the ones that didn't follow the systems and the rules as much, or they had a different structure and they had extra space for creativity because there was more of a budget built in to allow that for the project still to be profitable. So that was kind of, just some ideas on how we approach that.
The thing is, and I want to clarify, I guess, what the successes have been with us, 6 years ago, sitting down and going, you know what, this is hard work, changing the rules on every inch of this business all the time. And we just exited out of a relationship we had with one of our clients just recently because no matter what we did, they did not follow our process. It makes our business run inefficiently, and it makes it very frustrating, very hard to do things the way they should be done when clients just won't comply. So we had to get rid of them. That was like our first fire of a client in years. But when Brendan and I first sat down and started talking about this concept of productizing, because what you've done with your story video kind of off the shelf package is what we've done for 20 or 30 different videos. We are very systematized about our approach to video marketing because we believe that clients needed an option that removed creative variables from the equation. And they're so unfamiliar with that concept when they approach us because they want to immediately jump into bed and go, oh, well, so we want it like shot on this and we want it here and we want this person to be on camera and we want to include this footage. It's like, hang on a sec, let's pull it back and start talking about communication. Let's just talk about why you want it, what the problem is it's solving. And so it's almost to a point where if anyone throws us in the deep end and says, "Oh, okay, so how much do you want to pay for this video?" It's sort of like we have to stop them and say, "Hang on a sec, we're not ready for that conversation." And so there is maturity over, I guess, 20 years, and I feel like I'm trying to justify our position, but I just want to give clarity that even a creative business can be incredibly process orientated and process driven. And we've had a very interesting experience with our video editor where she's come in with that concept of like, well, isn't it all just creative and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, actually, you'll be surprised at how regimented this is. And it's like this because we want to build a business that works without us. And we want things to run smoothly. And the only way that we can see to do that is to follow McDonald's philosophy. And, it doesn't need to be that everything's like crystallized, but it's a progressive, ongoing process of continually looking for ways to do things better. The DIY video program helps you personalize sales, produce video emails, and record videos regularly without tech hassles. Look and sound amazing in every video meeting and go to ridgefilms.com.au/DIY. Is it a slow process of just chipping away? How does a freelancer just come to the conclusion that what they're doing with recording these Loom videos and all that is actually working? Like, where do they find the confidence and the motivation to go, yep, it's working. I see the big picture. Let's just keep on going.
Am I allowed to jump on a rant now?
Please.
I can. I feel like
You're
I can
the guest.
Because I've written it down on a little bit of paper. There are 3 points there because you had touched on 3 things that I felt as equally passionate about each one. So the first one is around this idea, if we go back just a touch, to the idea of firing staff. And firing clients. Yeah. But it's the same with staff as well. The most amount of resistance that you are going to get from this new approach as you start to build a systems culture in your organization is from your existing relationships, whether it's clients, whether it's staff. It's the people who are used to you doing things a certain way. Once you start recruiting staff and effectively clients, because that's really what you're doing with your marketing, you're kind of recruiting and figuring out if you're a good fit. If you do all of the right recruitment strategies and onboarding strategies and your sales strategies, you're pre-framing what it is that they're going to expect. It makes perfect sense that the one that was the most resistant to change was the one that has been with you the longest. But now this only gets easier. And that's one reason why videographers and business owners sometimes abandon this initiative for systemizing a business, because all of the resistance and challenge is up front. They do it for a little bit for 2 or 3 months, and then they go, oh, the team's pushing back. Clients are pushing back. Oh, no, this is not going to work. The systems don't work for us. We tried that. Doesn't work. And it's good to hear how long you've persisted at it. So I think that was worth identifying. The second point was around the McDonaldization of the business. Now, this is an interesting one. I remember reading an interview with Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, and he was talking about when they started on the process of systemizing their business. He said, we wanted to dummy proof our business. So we put systems for everything, meticulous, detail down to the nth degree. And he said, after we dummy proofed our business, we found that only dummies wanted to work here. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting that they had over systemized? And sometimes there's a misconception thinking, well, if I'm going to systemize, I have to systemize like McDonald's, and it has to be to that level of detail. But there's a good chance some videographers might not be building a hamburger business. So we don't need to necessarily follow their roadmap exactly, but there's a lot of so key valuable lessons to be learned from McDonald's, how they got started. We don't look at how McDonald's is today. They're this lean machine, systemized. They can open stores within 30 days and meticulous the way that the store runs, recruit. Like they are, every aspect of their business is down to sort of like a fine-tooth comb. That's the result of 60 years worth of work. But if you come back and you look at the movie The Founder with Michael Keaton, which is the homework, I love setting homework for videographers that is to watch a movie because I feel like that's right up their alley. So your homework is to watch The Founder. And right at the start of that movie, they are out on a basketball court and they've got some chalk and they're mapping out the floor plan of one of the stores. And they say, let's put the fryer here. Let's put the registers here. Let's put the drinks machine here. Oh, no, let's move that over here. And that is the way that systems are built. You start off rough and ready. You kind of just get whatever best practice is. You make a tweak, you move things around. And that kind of speaks to what you were talking about around this idea of this slow process. It is a cultural change that you're looking to have here. It's a way of doing things. I just want to make sure that, there are different ways to build a business and it's an expression of the business owners. There's just as much art in here as there is science. And there is a way to find a healthy balance by rip out some of the creativity and we're just robots following a process. But you can create enough of a structure that helps your team members win. You set their level of expectation. You make it within the confines of, business and profitability and making sure that you can continue to sustain. Because that's always the biggest risk for a lot of creatives is they'll sit down, like you said, in that first meeting, the client will be wide-eyed, you'll be wide-eyed thinking of all of these things, not thinking about, what the budget's going to look like. Sometimes the client will have one picture in their head. The picture in your head is very different. And that misalignment ends up causing issues. And then there's scope creep and then there's extra edits. And, can you change one small thing? Little do they know, moving that scene changes the whole sound score and it changes the graphics. Yes. And like that one little thing is one very, very big thing. Yes. So having rules and structure, you want to find that balance. And it might be, just as an example, something like we have one major edit. Yes. And then we have two minor edits. Right. Yep. A major edit, we can move structure, change music, blah, blah. But as we get closer past we're not going back and changing these other things without additional costs.
There's a lot of, there's so many things, Brendan, and you've probably been nodding all the way through this, but that we had nipped in the bud, trust the process, iron out those types of things, lay out the rules, make sure that it's clear to the client, keep them steered in the right direction, don't let it get out of hand. All of these things, we're becoming more and more familiar with now that we're obviously bringing on the staff, but it was something that was so painful for us many, many years ago that we had to nip in the bud. And just through listening to other stories of smaller companies going through that arduous process of endless amounts of changes is enough to go, we'd just never want to go through that. And what's interesting about your rant is I'm ex-McDonald's. I got to see it firsthand. I saw Founders. I love that movie.
It can be quite polarizing because my line, oftentimes I will say, is don't systemize like McDonald's. And I do that as a little bit of a pattern interrupt because most people, they automatically think like, of course I need to systemize like McDonald's. So it's always funny when I talk to someone from McDonald's or who's worked there, they hear me say that. Because really when you get down to the guts of it, I'm saying don't systemize like McDonald's is today. Yes. Systemized like McDonald's was 60 years ago. And that's the real insight.
And you know what? Yeah, so I do have a question at the end of this, but do you know what's like even yesterday I had a chat with a client and, we had a good half an hour together and she's very interested in the DIY program and all this other stuff. And at the end of the meeting, she said something like, so do you have anything like that I can see? And I was really like, what do you want to see? It's like stuff that your clients have done and da-da-da-da. And she was basically beating around the bushes to say, show me what my thing's going to look like. And that was the realization many years ago is like, you could explain until you're blue in the face what the product's going to be and visualize it and paint the picture and put the storyboards together and all of that sort of stuff. But they will never know unless you offer some kind of real representation of what it is. So, why did McDonald's succeed? Is it because they had the juicy, succulent hamburger that was consistent no matter where you went? Was that the thing that was kind of moving? All right, now we just got to keep doing that for fries and thick shakes and everything else, and we'll keep packaging and packaging and packaging so that people build that trust and consistency with the product. Now, the answer to that lady's question from yesterday was, yeah, here's the products page. There's the list of all of our products. But the one that you want to be looking at because you're a legal firm is this. And here's what your thing's going to look like. This is what other lawyer firms have done for you. And she's like, okay, I think I've got everything I need. Thank you. So there's this idea that, the selling almost is done through, obviously reputation and skin in the game and all of that. But a lot of the convincing, can you do this job, is done in the proof of the work.
That you hit the nail on the head. This applies across the board to all business. When a client is thinking about working with you, they want to know, can you deliver on your promises? Because everybody can make promises. And sometimes some of the best way to prove that you can deliver on promises is to say, here's the other times when I've dealt with someone who's just like you and I delivered on my promises and they got the amazing result that I'm promising you right now. And then that gets them to go, oh yeah, I can trust this and believe this. So there's nothing better as a videographer than building up your portfolio of clients. And if you can go, yep, here's the legal person that I worked with who is almost in a similar situation to you, and here's what we did for them. That then they just go, oh, wow, my level of risk here is dropping significantly. A big part of what I think about for consistency for videographers is consistency in the experience. What was the sales process, the briefing process, the proposal? You set out the timeline, you shot when you said you were going to, you got the first edit when you were going to. Like, that's the bit. If you can nail that level of consistency, that's what keeps clients coming back. Because in the video space, especially for the solo freelance people, they really struggle to deliver on that. And that's painful for clients. They don't necessarily like that. So if you can solve that problem, you're probably, 99% above all other videographers, because so many videographers just can't do consistency.
That's right. Yeah, there's many a times where we've won a project purely based on that we have a process, and clients feel reassured that there is something there to hold their hand through that, because they don't know what necessarily that they're going to get at the end. But the fact that up front we tell them there's a process and we'll hold your hand through it, it's great for clients. People really respond to that really well. They
see it firsthand. A short reply inquiry video has just been as a game changer for our business. To see a reply to the inquiry through video in 30 seconds, and they're just like, yeah, I'll book in, do whatever you want to do, because it looks like you guys have got it covered. I do have a couple of other questions, if that's all right. Yeah. We'll wrap up in the next 6 minutes. I want to get you out on time. I know we've talked about Loom and how great it is, but I'm really curious to know, where do you see a business that has loads of video content, maybe for their systems, maybe for their marketing, maybe in their sales? What role do you think video can play in, I guess, the systematizing, but also the salability of that business?
Well, I think they kind of go hand in hand. When I think about salability of business, a big part of it is de-risking the purchase for the potential acquirer. Like, they don't want to buy a business that is so key person dependent, and they think, oh, wow, as soon as I buy this business, if Chris walks out the door, what am I left with? He's going to walk out with all of the clients with him. So regardless of what the business is, that's what the acquirer is thinking. Like, is this going to continue to function as well when the key people walk out the door? So a big part of that is the systems and making sure that that's in place, and the way that clients are dealt with and things like that. And I've got, I suppose, a unique experience with regards to video businesses, because I ended up selling the Melbourne video production, which is quite rare. You don't see a huge amount of turnover in video-based businesses, oftentimes because it's a little bit like, or seen a bit like, a dentist or something where someone oftentimes bonds with the person doing the work. And then when the sale of the business happens, if they're gone, the client either goes somewhere else or follows that person over to the next business. But when we had built Melbourne Video Production, because I didn't know how to get on the tools and I didn't build the business just around me, we built it to the point where it was this machine that was working without me, and there was some real value there. And that's what it was that we ended up marketing, because we had some changes in the business. My main operations manager, she had to move to the US, and for some family reasons, I stepped out of the digital agency and the video business as I was building up System Hub and Systemology. And then when she came back, she basically had said, look, I'm going to have to resign and move to the States. And then I was left with a situation. I was like, do I get sucked back into the business and start to run this? Or do I look to sell and exit? And that was where I thought, well, look, my passion is now in Systemology. I've kind of fallen out of love with the digital agency and that type of work. So I thought, now's the right time to sell. And then I did. I ended up selling it, sold both businesses. And the thing that they cited that they were buying it were two reasons. One was the financial performance, and the other was the systems, because they just wanted to take that and then ingest it into their business. So it's one of those things where by recording everything, getting on the path for systemizing, whether you sell or not is irrelevant. You should always be building as though you're going to sell, because you never know what's going to happen. I didn't think I was going to sell. It wasn't until Melissa resigned and I thought, what am I going to do? Do I want to do this? No, okay, now's the time to exit. So systemizing, recording everything gives you options. And that's really what all of this is about.
David, thank you so much for coming on and helping us get clarity over our business. And I'm sure there's many of our listeners that would think the same, would get loads and loads, no matter if they were a small sole trader or a large marketing manager. I'm sure there's loads to take away from getting things out of your head and into video. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure. If I could do a final little plug, I will. Get yourself a copy of Systemology. There we go. If you head over to Amazon or if you're an audio person, that is a useful and complete documentation of my methodology. Great place to start if you're thinking about systems. And then, of course, if you need a hand with anything, just reach out. I'm over at systemology.com.
And Brendan can confirm the book's excellent.
Perfect. I've read the book cover to cover. I plan on reading it again cover to cover. Thank you very much, Dave. It's made a massive difference in the business. I highly recommend it.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's all for this episode of Video Made Simple podcast. Having a system in producing videos shouldn't restrict creativity, just as owning a business shouldn't restrict you from getting work-life balance by systematizing it. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next week.